This session is on meat. Archaeology can tell us quite a lot about meat consumption in Roman Britain because the people who study bone from archaeological excavation, zooarchaeologists, are able to tell which animal the bones come from, how old it was when it was slaughtered, and also look at the proportion of the different cuts of meat that were being eaten in any particular place. One of the things they found out is the fact that before the Romans arrived, there was the most common meat to be eaten was sheep or goat. They're quite difficult to tell apart, so quite often we just describe them as sheep/goat. And there was quite a lot of sheep or goat still being eaten by the people who were less Romanised. In the more Romanised places, there was more cattle and pigs being eaten. And the recipes we're going to be discussing today are a stew of lamb and grilled pork. We'll start with the lamb stew. We have 500 grams of lamb here. It's from a Welsh mountain breed called Badger Face, and this is the Torwen variety, which actually looks very similar to some of the very primitive breeds like Soay sheep. So it's probably quite similar to the what was being eaten in Roman Britain. This comes from a rare breeds farm near Llandilo, and I get it at the farmer's market. And we're going to chop up an onion. The lamb in this recipe, which comes from the lamb section of Apicius, is described as cuppadia, which seems to refer to some sort of cut-up meat, although the precise meaning isn't entirely clear. There's another chapter which contains sauces for cuppadia, and they're alongside sauces for boiled meat. So it seems that perhaps that that cuppadia are cooked in some sort of boiling liquid, water, or in this case wine. And a bunch of coriander, including the root. As I said for the recipe on lentils, the root actually is very good for maintaining the flavour while it's being cooked, less so the leaves. But obviously if you can't get hold of coriander with the root, then you just have to manage with the leaves. Then we grind our spices. We want half a teaspoonful of black pepper, a teaspoonful of cumin, and half a teaspoonful of lovage. Put them over a low heat until they become crisp. The encyclopedist Pliny the Elder mentions that lovage could be replaced by aniseed, but if you do that, you only need about half the amount. Now we've ground them, we add them to the casserole, along with six 60 millilitres of white wine, tablespoonful of fish sauce, and a tablespoonful of olive oil. Oops, slightly messy, it's a full dip. Stir that around. And we put the oven on to 180 degrees centigrade. That's without a fan assist. If your oven has a fan assist, then just be guided by what it says on the instructions. And we cook that. Now the oven's up to temperature, we'll put the meat in. This is shoulder of lamb, so I've given it about an hour and a half, and by this time it should be fairly tender. Yes, that's reasonably tender. So now we want to thicken it slightly using corn flour. The recipe says wheat starch, but corn flour is a very acceptable substitute. And we want about a teaspoonful of that with a little bit of water. Stir that in. Put it back in the oven for another quarter of an hour just to thicken. There we are, that should be ready now. Nicely done with thick gravy. The next section comes from a manuscript called Extracts from Apicius by Vinidarius, which contains some of the same recipes or very similar recipes to the main Apicius collection, but quite a lot of them are different, including this one. It's a recipe for pork with coriander. I'm cooking it as a grill. It could also be cooked as a roast. And we start by chopping up the herbs, coriander of course. We want a bunch of it. And then we want about half a teaspoonful of dillweed, on one side because we're going to have to pound the pepper first. And about a teaspoonful of oregano. And we also want a quarter of a teaspoonful of pepper, and I find that white pepper is actually better with this one. White pepper was preferred by the Romans to black pepper, and it gives a cleaner, fresher taste. So we pound that up, starting with the pepper. are reduced to a paste, we add the liquid ingredients. We need a teaspoonful each of fish sauce, wine vinegar and runny honey, a tablespoonful of grape juice concentrate, de frutum, a tablespoonful of olive oil, and 60 millilitres of wine. And I find that the best wine to use with pork recipes is a red which isn't too full-bodied. I'll just put a little bit there at the moment and incorporate the rest later, otherwise it might splash. This meat comes from the Rare Breeds farm again. It's a cross between wild boar and a Tamworth pig. The grill is now glowing, so we will brush the pork with a little bit of oil. And put it under the grill, and we will give it about 4 or 5 minutes per side. If you get your meat from the supermarket, it will have the time recommended for the thickness of the steaks on the pack. Right, we'll have a look and see how it's doing. And turn the meat over. Brush the other side with more oil. And put it back under the grill for another 5 minutes. Right, it's had another 5 minutes, so we'll see how well done it is. Pork should be reasonably firm. Put these to rest. While the meat is resting, we'll heat the sauce and prepare the garnish. The garnish is chopped spring onion, a tablespoonful of pine nuts, and a tablespoonful of raisins which have been pre-soaked. And then we pour the sauce over the meat and scatter the garnish over, making sure that everybody has a bit.